Back in the garage, back in the garage, back in the garage today, back in the garage. Alright guys, back in the garage today, getting ready to go out on my really big trip to Yellowstone National Park. Got the FJR up on the lift, got to get the oil change, go over a few things before we take off. And I figured I'd do an update to that video I did where I changed the oil on it about a year ago that I posted on YouTube. So, let's go. Alright, so we're changing it on my 2007 FJR today. A few things you're going to need. At least on the FJR, you're going to need a 17mm socket or wrench. You're also going to need, this is optional, a 4mm Allen to pull this panel back a little bit. 4.23 quarts of 10W40. Just make sure it's motorcycle specific oil and not car oil. You might need a filter wrench. You're definitely going to need a new filter. You may or may not need a crusher washer. I change mine every other time. And then some sort of funnel. I also have these highway pegs on mine, and it's just easier for me to pull this off, so I also use a 5mm Allen. And last but not least, you're going to need something to catch your oil in. Now the next thing is totally optional, but awesome if you have it, and that's a lift, so you don't have to get down on the floor, but you don't need it. Just makes things a whole lot nicer. And one thing I didn't mention, but I did do off camera, is you should get the bike warmed up, get the oil heated up inside. It makes it a whole lot easier to drain out and ensures you get more oil out of the crankcase. So step number one, you have a, be careful it's hot, you have a 17mm drain plug right here. We're going to take it out first. Now the next thing I'm going to do while I'm waiting on the oil to drain out is take out these 3 Allens to take this highway peg off. I don't have to, it just makes it a whole lot easier to get to this filter. Alright, so with the highway peg removed, it's a whole lot easier to get to this, but so we don't make a mess here, we're going to pull this out. This is where your 4mm Allen comes in handy. Now, by removing that bolt, what that's going to allow you to do is pull this piece back, so when you take this filter off, you're going to get some oil draining out. Hopefully we can keep most of it off of this piece of the fairing. Another thing you can do is take your T-handle and just kind of jam that in between there, and you notice there's no oil getting on this fairing at all. We're going to give it a couple of minutes, let as much oil as possible drain out, and then we'll get to putting the bike back together. Alright, so while we're waiting on the oil to drain out, we want to go ahead and get this crusher washer off of the drain plug and get the new one installed. Now I'd use a knife to get this pried off a little bit. Just be careful that you don't mess up your threads. So this one comes off. And the new one goes on. Also, before you put this back in, just make sure you've cleaned the threads really good with a paper towel. Now, since it's almost done draining out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm going to clean this whole area up. Typically, I would put the drain plug back in first, but in this case, because I have this fairing in the way, I'm going to go ahead and put the oil filter on first, and then I'll get to the drain plug. Something else real quick to do, dip your finger down in your new oil and just give it a nice little bead around there. That'll help create a really good seal. Now I've got the oil filter on there. It's just hand tightened right now. Again, I'm going to wipe down all the excess oil around here. I believe this thing's supposed to be 20 foot-pounds of torque. I don't use a torque wrench on it. I just hand tighten it. That way I don't over tighten it. You do whatever you want, but I've found best to just hand tighten these things. Alright, now I'm just going to put this little bolt back into this fairing piece. And then now, even though I don't use a torque wrench on the filter, I do like to use a torque wrench on the drain bolt. On this bike, it is 31 foot-pounds of torque, so we'll get it set and move on. Alright, so we got the drain plug back in. Next thing I'm going to do is move this out of the way and then wipe down any other excess oil I have, and then we'll get up here and get to filling this thing back up with some fresh oil. Alright, the last thing to do is add oil back in. This bike calls for 4.23 quarts. I'm going to put in just a little bit over 4, and then I'm going to show you how to check it. Alright, so every bike's checking procedures are slightly different. On the Yamaha, you should have it on the center stand. We're going to start it up. We're going to let it run for a few minutes, and then we're going to check the sight glass. Now, it has not ran yet, so I'm going to start it up right now, and then check it out. Now, it should be noted that on the sight glass, you're going to want it right about in the middle there. It normally has a high and low line. We'll see where mine is after we run it. Alright, so you see the oil coming back in there. It looks like it's just a tad bit low. I'm going to add just a little bit and we should be good. Just add a little bit more oil and it looks like we're right on the money. Now, I always recommend keeping some sort of record of what you've done to your bike. write down the type of oil, the weight, the bolt size, anything that you're going to need next time you go to change it, because you're probably going to forget. One more quick thing, make sure you check under your bike tomorrow morning, make sure there's no oil leaks or anything like that. You should be good to go, but if you didn't get something tight, now's the time to catch it instead of when you're out on the road. Alright guys, so that's it. That's how you change the oil and filter on a Yamaha FJR1300. It's probably not a whole lot different on your bike. Now that you know how to do it, you can do it yourself, save yourself a bunch of cash from having to take it to the dealer, and know that it's been done right. You also just earned yourself a beer, so grab a cold one, pat yourself on the back. You did a good job. If you enjoyed today's video, please give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, I guess I'm sorry. If you're not a subscriber, I look forward to you being one, and I will talk to you guys again soon.